All right, typing in Python, types in Python, all things working with variable types in Python. Let's see how we can tackle this one without sparking and triggering all the contentious and religious opinions that many people have about static typing, especially when it comes to Python. Some people say, leave my types alone. I want them to be dynamic. Other people come from a strongly typed language and they say, this is the way I think the world should work, so you should work this way. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play these games. I'm just going to be honest with you. I am pretty self-taught when it comes to Python, and in the beginning, I didn't care about types at all. And over time, as I've gotten more experienced, they've become a more important part of my development workflows. And in my opinion, if you use them well, then they can help you avoid silly errors. They can help you force certain types of errors that otherwise might go through and cause weirder errors down the chain. So it makes it easier for you to troubleshoot if you know that a function is only going to work with certain types of ingredients, and it's going to complain if it gets ingredients it doesn't expect. But then there's also the factor of, if you use typing really well, you don't even have to be making things statically typed. You could use type hints in a way that informs you as a developer of what a function needs. We'll also sprinkle in some doc strings. We'll take a look at some of the Google best practices for how you can kind of make your functions better. So maybe this will even go beyond just simple conversation about types, and hopefully touch on just how can you in general maybe approach your Python code in a way that makes you more productive. All right, so a little bit about what the environment that we're working in here. We are going to be reaching out into the cryptocurrency world. That's why I have this thing here called Gemini Exchange and crypto prices. Because I don't want to just make a hello world kind of thing where we're passing around some static text that we created that says hello and world and, hey there. Instead, I want to grab data from the Gemini Exchange, and then we'll see like, oh, okay, this data comes in a certain format. And maybe we can let ourselves know what kind of data we expect when this function that we build is working, and then we can take that data and do something else with it in another function, and we can see how these type hints that we build and eventually even type checking can help us in our workflows. So let's dive in. We are going to be writing our functions in one module or in one file, and then we're going to be importing them and using them in another file, just so that we can kind of exaggerate the blindness that you will often have if you're writing functions in one area of your code base and then using them in another. And that's where type hints and using them to their fullest in Python is really going to benefit you, because it's going to very quickly let you get up to speed on what a function needs to get the job done and what you should be expecting a certain function to return back to you. So let's do this, getting some data from this cryptocurrency exchange. So we're going to hop out to the REST API. We're going to take a look at some of the public APIs where we don't need to be authenticated, and we're going to look at symbols. And so for starters, let's just get a list of these symbols. This is simple enough. This seems like a pretty straightforward thing to start with. So let's just take this endpoint, and we'll go over here into our Python code, and let's make a function. Let's call this get Gemini symbols, because that is what we're doing. It's always nice to be very straightforward with your function names. And for starters, we're not going to use any type hints. We're just going to see what this looks like. We are going to say my response equals requests. I am using the request library up here. This is going to allow us to issue a GET request against the Gemini Exchange. So requests.get, because we're doing a GET request, and then whatever the endpoint is that we are putting in here. All right, so this should get us a bunch of those symbols, and then in order to return what that response has inside of it, let's just return the response.json. All right, nothing else for this function for now. Let's go out here and let's say we are going to import that functionality. So we wrote all this code in this file called Gemini Exchange. And then to kind of simulate a more production environment with your code, we are going to go ahead and import this. And so the file structure here is kind of telling us how our import statement's going to look. And then we end up importing everything that's in that file. So if we want to use the function that's there, we can just say, let's go ahead and just print that Gemini Exchange function. Which function do we want? We want that get Gemini symbols. Well, it's the only one that's in there right now, but that's the one that we want. And let's go ahead and run this just to make sure, quick sanity check, that what we're writing here actually works. And sure enough, we get this list down here. It's a list of all the different symbols that this cryptocurrency exchange trades. Now, let's actually focus on the typing conversation here. As a developer, if I'm using this function that I've imported, right now I'm kind of flying blind. I'm using get Gemini symbols, but I don't really know what it is that's being returned to me. Right here we see that my PyCharm IDE, by the way, I am using PyCharm. It's probably the best, well, in my opinion, the best Python IDE you could use. Of course, there's others out there, but PyCharm Community Edition is free, so if you are writing all your Python code in Sublime Text right now, highly recommend checking out this PyCharm IDE. But anyways, IDEs are really there to make your life easier. And what this is doing for me is it's telling me, it's inspecting this function. It's saying, oh, the type here is not specified. This could be anything. Returns any. Well, okay. But maybe it's good for me to know in other functions where I might use this that this data I'm getting is a list of string values. So how could we let ourselves know that? This is where we could come to the function and you can use type hints. So type hints work both for variables that you're passing into a function. They also work for the function itself, like what is this function returning? So here I'm specifying with this little arrow that I'm making that I'm going to return some sort of type. And for starters, I could just say, well, I'm returning a list. And if we hover over our function now, we can see, oh, okay, get Gemini symbols returns a list. That's good to know, but there's a better way to do this as well, or a more in-depth way. You can actually get more granular with that information. And if we import some things from this built-in part of the standard library typing module, so from typing, we can import various things. In this case, I just want to import list. And what this allows me to do is I can say that we are looking at a list, but it's a list of something specific. So it's not a list of integers, it's not a list of Booleans, this is a list of string values. So we go back out here and we hover over this function and we can see, oh, okay, get Gemini symbols returns me a list of strings. All right, now this is a simple function, so let's move on. Let's kind of build up some momentum here, and I guess I'm a liar. I'm not going to do that in step 2. we did that all up here in step 1, but let's skip down here to step 3. And actually, before we get to step 3, let's see if we can make this be all that it can be. So one thing that I'm missing right now is if I'm hovering over this function, I don't really know exactly what it does. I know what it returns to me. So, whoops, I do want to point out that it's never a bad idea to just add a little doc string. Even if it's a one-liner, like this doc string might say, returns a list of all available crypto symbols on the Gemini exchange. And maybe this name is already enough for you to say, well, obviously. But this is a good habit to get into, writing these doc strings. Like you come out here, you hover over this function. Now you see not only what this thing is returning to you, But you also see, oh, this little one-liner, that's really nice to know. Returns a list of all available crypto symbols on the Gemini exchange. Now, if we look out here to the Google style guide, you'll see that if your functions are a little bit more involved, like maybe you need a longer explanation, there are some best practices about how to make these doc strings. And I would highly encourage you to follow this. So if you have a bunch of parameters, a bunch of arguments that you have in your functions, then you can just kind of give more information about this instead of just describing the type. You could give a little bit of information about what that thing actually is inside this doc string for your functions. All right. So I'm going to do that in all the functions that we write. So now we know what all these symbols are. Let's get a little bit more advanced. Let's go a little bit deeper in this rabbit hole. And let's actually grab some pricing data for like Bitcoin or Ethereum. So let's define another function. And this function is going to be get prices for symbol. Once again, because that's what we're doing. And this time, instead of just being a no argument function, we're actually going to define something here. Let's say symbol. And once again, let's start this out without using types. So we'll fly blind here and we'll just say, maybe we do add a doc string. So we can say returns the price history for for the specified crypto symbol. And now we can say, all right, what do I need in order to get these prices? So we can go out to the REST API, and once again, let's look at the public APIs, but we want this candles endpoint, which is going to actually pull us the prices, and we can specify a time frame, it looks like, as well as a symbol. So let's just go ahead and copy all of this. And I'm going to make note of these time frames really quickly. And let's just say we want daily prices. So it looks like I want this 1 day thing. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say response equals requests.get. And once again, I'm going to paste in my endpoint that I'm hitting. But now instead of just hitting any random symbol, let's actually make this be the symbol that gets passed into the function. So I'm going to use an F string here, that is putting F in front of my quotes, which allows me to, if you're in Python 3.6 or higher, this allows you to do this kind of syntax where you put in these curly braces and then you put the actual variable and it inserts that value into your string. So that's super handy. And then for the time frame here, I'm going to, for now, let's just say that I don't pass in a time frame. Let's just define this as time frame equals 1 day, and then I'm just going to say time frame here. So we get whatever symbol that we are looking for, and then we get the data at that time frame specified. Now we want to return our response.json once again. All right, so we can go back out here to our little working area, and let's take a look at what happens when we use that Gemini exchange dot get prices for symbol. So for the symbol, we could say, let's just use one of these ones down here, like BTC USD. Symbol equals BTC USD. So let's run this and let's see what we get. All right, so we get some data for that cryptocurrency, and it looks like it's returning us a nested list. So we get one big list, and inside of that list is a list of things. It looks like we have maybe an integer, a decimal value, like a floating point number, maybe another integer. So it looks like it's a combination of integers and floats. So if I hover over this function, though, we don't know anything about what's getting returned to us. So once again, we're kind of just flying in the dark. Even the symbol, it could be anything. So if I'm using this function, like let's say months down the road, or a different developer, someone on my team is using this, like what is symbol? Is symbol a list of stuff? Is it a dictionary? Is it a string? So let's kind of remove all the mystery there, and we can just say, oh, this is supposed to be a string. And now right out of the box, this is kind of useful because let's say that someone doesn't know it's supposed to be a string, and they're just coming in here and they say, oh, symbol is 15, or my dad's favorite number, 42. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. So you can look at this and you can say, oh, we expected to type string, but you gave us an integer instead. And right now, Python's being super polite about it. It's saying there is a type hint on this argument or this parameter, and the argument that you are passing in is an integer, but we expected to see a string. But Python's kind of being a little bit passive about it. It's like, okay, expected to see a string. You gave me an integer, but it's fine. And if I run this, it's still going to run. There's no exception that gets thrown by Python, but we can see that the server, because we didn't throw an error ourselves, we end up passing a kind of garbage request to the server, and the server is going to end up coming back to us and saying, oh, 42 is not a valid symbol. It's like, well, of course it's not, because it's a number, it's not a string, and all of the symbols are string values. So at this point, I do want to introduce this extra thing that can be really useful. If you know that you want your type hints to be a little bit stronger than hints, and you want them to actually force people to respect that type that you're defining here, what you can do is you can import, first you would need to install this library called typeguard. But then once you have typeguard installed, you can say from typeguard import type checked. And what you can do is now you can decorate your functions that you want to be type checked with this type checked decorator. And I'm not going to get into what decorators are in this conversation, but you can just be content with seeing how they're used. Like I imported this thing, and I'm just doing this at type checked on the top of my function. This works for classes as well. But now what's going to happen is if I come back out here and I try to run this, we are going to see type error. Type of argument symbol must be a string. We got integer instead. Okay. So you'll also notice that my type hint here is still complaining. And let's see if I fix this. So we go back to BTC USD and I can hit run, and now everything works fine. Okay. But what's actually going to happen here, I do want to just maybe add in some other, I don't want to make it seem like this is completely bulletproof, right? Like let's say that I put in a symbol that's incorrect. Like here I've doubled up on the C's, and this is a symbol that doesn't exist, so we should get a failure here. All right, so this doesn't work out. But, that's also easy enough to fix. Like we might even add something in here where we say, okay, I have this nice function up here that's getting my symbols. Well, why don't I just say that I have some valid symbols? So valid symbols equals get Gemini symbols. I can even hover over this. I'm seeing, oh, it's a list of strings. Great. So because I know it's a list and it's a list of strings, I can write some logic here that kind of uses it knows that I can iterate through that list. So I'll just say if my symbol is not in valid symbols, then let's raise a value error, and let's just say, the symbol, here, let's use an F string here, and then we can say the symbol, and actually tell you which symbol you passed in, does not exist. Please use one of, and then we can just do valid symbols. So let's see what this looks like. If we come back out here to our code and we run this again. All right, the symbol BTCCUSD does not exist. Please use one of these. And this is the guy that I want. So let's just put that in here. And we can see, all right, our code is getting a little bit more bulletproof, getting a little bit more production worthy. All right, that was a little bit of a digression there, going into something that doesn't really have to do with our types, but useful, hopefully, nonetheless. So now let's also add in, while we're here, maybe let's just make this, instead of always being a 1-day time frame, let's give the user the option to specify a time frame. And I want to show you this because maybe sometimes you want to have type hints and even type checking, but you also want a parameter to be optional. You don't want it to be absolutely necessary that somebody passes this in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, time frame is a string, and now if we run this, let's see out here, we should get an error because it's missing time frame. Okay, good. So now what we want to do is we want to say, let's get rid of this because we have time frame coming into the function now. And now we're no longer, the IDE is not complaining about time frame because it's no longer redefined down here. And the thing is, I don't want to get this error. When I run this, I don't want to get missing a required argument. I actually want to default to maybe like that 1-day level of prices. And so what I can do is I can say, well, this is not just a string. I can say this is an optional string. And where does optional come from? We can see my IDE complaining about that this thing doesn't exist right now. Well, from typing, we imported list. We can also import optional. So this is just some additional functionality that's here to allow us to support this optional value. But I can also set a default value on this. So let's just say that it defaults to 1 day. So if we come back out here and we run this, we're going to see that I didn't specify a time frame, but it automatically plugs in that 1 day for me. But then if I wanted to, I could rerun this and I could say time frame equals, we could come out here to the REST API, we could choose any of these. So let's say maybe I want 1 hour, we can put in 1 hour. All right, so now I'm getting all the 1 hour time frames. So then one final thing we can do here, let's get rid of this because I was all over the place with where I wrote my code. But I do want to finally just take this, since we've gone so far with this cryptocurrency data and it's kind of in this ugly format, I do just want to push us over the finish line a little bit here and get this into a format that's going to work a little bit better for us. So before we stick this data into a pandas data frame, let's make sure that we have we practice this the kind of best practices in terms of making this code readable for the rest of our team or for ourselves down the road. And again, I'm not trying to say you have to do this, but I do want to show you what I do. I found it to be very helpful. First of all, let's say what this function's returning. This is returning a list of something that is a list, and within that list, it looks like you could have either floats or integers. So for starters, I'm just going to do that. So now when we come out here and we say get prices for symbol, we can see, oh, okay, I need to pass into this function symbol, which is a string. I need to pass in time frame, which is an optional string, defaults to 1 day. And then I need to expect this to return to me a list of floating values or integers, floating point values or integers. All right, so now we have our type hints for this all figured out, but we do have 2 arguments in here. We also have an error that's getting raised. So maybe, we can lean on these people over here at Google who kind of know what they're talking about in terms of engineering. They're very experienced in writing code. So unless we have a good reason to disagree with them, I think it's in general pretty good to just say, whatever Google's doing with their best practices in their Python code base, it's probably not going to hurt me to give those a try. So we see here for arguments, we could describe a little bit about our arguments. And then also for raises, we might want to just explain, oh, this thing raises, in our case, a value error. Let's explain that a little bit. So we can do that. Let's expand this docstring, and I'm going to say args. And for my arguments, I have symbol, and symbol is a string. And I'm just going to say the Gemini cryptocurrency symbol whose prices are being queried. All right, that's all the information we really need about that. And then time frame. The time frame for, well, let's just say the time interval between price data for the symbol being queried. And then that's it for our arguments, but we could also add this little note about what this thing raises. So if you raise any exceptions in your function, in this case we do, we can say raises and then value error. So let's say, yeah, if we can just say if the given or if the specified symbol does not exist. Let's just see how they phrase this. An error occurred accessing a small table. Then let's also use the same kind of phrasing, and let's just say the symbol provided was not found. All right. Now, of course, we could scrutinize this. We could make this perfect, but just trying to give you a little taste of what this stuff looks like when it all comes together for your production code. All right, now finally, let's make a function that's going to give us a pandas data frame. Let's use everything we've learned here about our type hints to make this function be all that it can be. And then we can look back out into our final usage of this function and see how type hints kind of let us know what's happening. So we are going to make a function here. Let's say def get price data frame. And once again, the function name is just telling us exactly what it's doing. And in this case, I'm actually going to use the same inputs here. And we are going to return a pandas data frame. But I don't have pandas imported yet. So let's come up here and let's say import pandas as PD. It's kind of the standard. So now I'm saying that the type that this function is going to return is a pandas data frame, and I'm going to make a little doc string down here. This is going to tell me what this function does, and this returns a pandas data frame describing the historical prices for the crypto symbol specified. Fair enough. Maybe we could come up with a better explanation than that, but let's just keep rolling. And so the final thing we really want to do here is we want to take a look at this REST API, and we want to say, all right, I'm issuing this request to get prices, and I'm getting this list of all these numbers thrown back at me, but what are these really? And that's where this response section of the REST API is going to tell us that what we're getting is a timestamp in milliseconds, and then all these other numbers are telling us various pricing information. And then finally, volume. Now we do want to be aware that the order matters here. So like the first value here, this is the timestamp. The second one is the opening price. Third one is the high price, and so on. And the last one is your volume. So out here, when we define this data frame, let's just make sure we define those column names, because I really don't want to just have these numbers without having any names to them. So let's define our price columns, and let's just make this, I believe it was time, and then we had open, high, low, close. So open, high, low, close, and then volume. All right, and now we really just need to get our data. So we have this nice function up here that gets our pricing data. So we can say get prices for symbol. My symbol is going to be whatever symbol was passed into this function. My time frame is going to be whatever time frame is passed into this function, or defaults to the day, to the 1 day if nothing's passed in. And then I'm going to put that data into a data frame. So I'm going to say, well, first of all, this needs to be price data, so we store that information. Then I'm going to say price df, so price data frame equals pd.dataframe. I'm creating my data frame here out of that data that we got. So data is price data. And then the columns, so what are my column names? That's here from this list that we just created, price calls. And finally, we are going to just add some extra details into this data frame. So we're going to make a new column. For example, like maybe we run this function. I actually do this a lot, so I'm not going to say maybe. I actually use this REST API to curate a data source for myself that tracks cryptocurrency prices. And I end up querying all of the symbols on the exchange. And so it might be nice for us to know which symbol this data is in this data frame, because we might end up appending other symbols data into this data frame. And, we don't just want to have to guess like, oh, did this data come from Bitcoin or did it come from Ethereum? So let's just name it right here. Let's say that we're going to add in a column called symbol, and that's just simply going to be whatever the symbol is for the data that's being generated. And then it might also be nice to know about the time frame, just in case you ended up cross-pollinating your data frames with multiple time frames. You have some granularity at the minute level, others at the hour, others at the day. You might want to know what that time frame was. All right, so enough of that. Let's just return the price data frame. And, every step of the way here as we're writing this function, it's like there's no mystery about what we need for get prices. We need to pass in a symbol that's a string. We need to give a time frame that's optional. But if we do pass it, it should be a string. And then we end up building this. And if we use this function, we built this with all our type hints in here and everything. Let's go ahead and also make this type checked. Then if we come out here to crypto prices, let's just get rid of this. Let's get rid of this guy up here as well. And let's just say, all right, I want that data frame. Well, let's say price df equals maybe even BTC USD price df. We're just going to query a specific symbol, and that symbol is going to be Bitcoin. So now we do Gemini Exchange dot get price data frame, and what do I need to pass into this? So my IDE is smart enough to pick up on this. All right, we need a symbol, and that's a string. Okay, what's my symbol going to be? My symbol is going to be BTC USD, and then you know what? I'm not even going to pass in my optional time frame. And if we run this now, too many parameters for typing list. Looks like I made an oopsie. Let's go back here. Get prices for symbol. Okay, yeah. So what I'm doing here is I specified two different types, right? Now you can do that if you expect there to be two different varieties, like that list isn't just going to be a float, it's not just an integer, it could be either of them. So in this case, I want to actually give a type that is a union of float and integer. Like it could be both of them living in harmony in this list. But union is another one of these things that I can import from typing. So actually kind of nice that I hit that error so you can see. There's even more stuff underneath the hood here for typing. This is just giving you the tip of the iceberg. But now if I run this, I don't see anything because I'm not printing this out. So let's print this, and then we can see this data frame that we end up getting. All right. So the moral of the story here, can you do everything that you saw here without type hints? Yes, but something that type hints is going to do for you is it's going to make your development experience a lot more informed. It's like driving with Google Maps on instead of just having to go to new territory and just guess which street you're turning onto. And then also you get this extra benefit of being able to introduce the typeguard library and type checked in particular, so that you can enforce those type hints that you've applied onto your parameters and in your classes and in your functions if you want it to be strict. So that's where I'm going to leave this off, and down the road we're going to do more of these tutorials touching on pretty general Python topics, but using real world data like this cryptocurrency data. So I hope to see you in future videos, and I hope that you got something out of this one.